What does a Cold War arms race, a near miss with a NATO warship, a dramatic shoot-down over Syria, and Ukraine's most daring long-range strikes all have in common? One airplane, the Sukhoi Su-24, or as NATO likes to call it, the Fencer. A twin-engine, swing-wing Soviet bomber that first flew over 50 years ago and is somehow still shaping battlefields in the 2020s, and, as I will explain later on, may have saved a nation. This is the Su-24 Fencer. To understand the Su-24, you have to understand what the Soviet Air Force was trying to get in the 1960s. Their existing strike aircraft, the Su-7B, had a problem. It was simply too small. You couldn't cram all the avionics you needed for a truly effective all-weather, day and night precision attack airplane. And the Cold War scenario where NATO's air defenses would be waiting for the massive Soviet offensive, flying in clear daylight at medium altitude was basically a death sentence. The Soviets needed something that could fly fast, fly low, punch through enemy radar cover, and hit targets in any weather. This might sound familiar for the American F-111 Aardvark, one of the most iconic planes in the Cold War. Sukhoi understood this and simply got to work. The first attempts were ambitious, but messy. They initially designed a delta-wing aircraft with a tandem two-seat cockpit. This went nowhere. They then tried a 6-engine design, yes, 6 engines, with 4 small lift jets to achieve a short field takeoff. They even built a flying test bed to try this out, as I show here. The results were pretty bad. Those lift engines ate up fuel, space, and killed the payload options. It made the aircraft quite dangerous, and simply was just not a good airplane. Then, when the F-111 entered service in 1967 and proved something, that variable geometry wings, or swing wing as many people call it, actually works. You could sweep the wings back for high speed, low dashes, or spread them for wide for takeoff, landing, and subsonic cruise. The Soviets took note, and by 1968, Sukhoi officially ordered to develop a swing wing variant. The resulting prototype, called the T-6-21, flew for the first time in January of 1970. After years of grueling trials, the development program killed 13 test pilots across 10 fatal accidents, just 13 and 10 accidents. This aircraft was somehow accepted into the Soviet service on the 4th of February 1975. So what exactly is this airplane? Well, the Su-24 is technically a supersonic all-weather tactical bomber and interdictor. Let's break this down. Tactical is the term the Soviets meant for battlefield-level strikes. This is a low-level or low-altitude, hitting bridges, airfield supply lines, command posts, rather than strategic bombing. There's a big difference. Strategic bombing is usually longer range, higher altitude, taking out industrial centers or even cities. This was designed for battlefield use. And if, I know this sounds crazy, if you lately played the War Thunder event, which by the way was fantastic, the Su-24 was extremely good at dropping tactical nukes, as I show here. This was one of the main purposes. This plane, they thought the war, when it broke out, or World War III was going to break out, there'd be a massive amount of tactical nukes used in Europe. This plane could fly low, extremely fast, and drop those, which would devastate the enemy and allow the Soviet tank force to push into Europe. That was the Soviet plan, and this plane actually had the perfect capabilities to do this plan. Now, what does all-weather mean? That's the key selling point. The first Soviet tactical airframe to feature an integrated digital navigation and attack system was this plane. The system, called Puma, used 2 overlapping radar scanners for navigation and targeting, a dedicated terrain following radar to let the aircraft skim the ground automatically at dangerously low altitudes. Basically, it's an autopilot that lets you fly like 100 feet in the air at supersonic speeds, lets you get below radar, lets you get to your target faster and safer. Highly effective, and in 1975, that was the most cutting edge there was. Had a crew of 2, a pilot and a weapons system officer who sat side by side, not in tandem. The arrangement was dictated by the large radar antennas up front, which need a wider fuselage. It also means the pilots can actually communicate pretty naturally. They're right next to each other. And the wings, as I mentioned, the Su-24 had 4 swept positions, a 16 degree for takeoff, and for landing was 35 and 45. For cruise, it can go all the way up to 69 degrees for that high speed, low level dashes, as I mentioned earlier. The variable geometry gives it really good short field performance. Landing speeds are actually lower than earlier Soviet jets, despite the Su-24 being much heavier thanks to the wings. The engines were two Saturn Lukai AL-21F-3 afterburning turbojets. This plane could go to Mach 1.6 at higher altitude or about Mach 1.06 at sea level, where most combat would be done. This is very useful for terrain hugging strike. It could go extremely fast, carry up to 8,000 kilograms of weapons across 9 hardpoints. That's about 17,600 pounds. Its arsenal ranges from unguided iron bombs to laser-guided munitions, anti-radiation missiles for killing radar systems, anti-ship missiles, and their 23mm rotary cannon. And as I mentioned earlier, tactical nukes. For self-defense, Su-24s could carry a complement of infrared missiles. However, the plane was never meant to dogfight. It was just a, fly low, fast, hit the target, shoot at a plane coming at you, and get out of there before anyone can kill you. Let's talk about this thing's combat history. This is where the Su-24 gets very interesting. The airplane first saw combat in Afghanistan in 1984, and again at the end of the war in 1988. Soviets came out of this campaign without losing a single fencer. During Operation Desert Storm in 1991, Iraq flew 24 of its 30 Su-24 MKs to Iran to keep them out of Allied hands. The 6 that didn't go were mostly destroyed on the ground. During the Chechen Wars in the 1990 and 2000s, Russia used its Su-24s flying bombing and reconnaissance mission, and they actually lost 4 airplanes, including 1 shot down by a surface-to-air missile. The Syrian Civil War, the Syrian Arab Air Force used Su-24s heavily against rebel forces from 2012 onward. The aircraft suffered multiple shootdowns, including being downed by an Israeli Patriot missile after briefly crossing into occupied Golan Heights in 2014. And 2 Syrian Su-24s were destroyed by the Turkish F-16s in March of 2020. When Russia intervened militarily in Syria in 2015, Su-24Ms were the workhorse of the campaign. These conducted over 80% of Russian airstrikes, even though more modern airplanes like the Su-30SM and Su-34 Fullback were present. This tells you something. Then came the 2015 shootdown, which is one of the most diplomatically explosive aviation incidents in history. On November 24, 2015, a Russian Su-24M operating over northern Syria was shot down by a Turkish F-16 near the Turkish-Syrian border. Russia insisted the jet never left Syrian airspace. Turkey claimed it crossed into Turkish territory and has been warned repeatedly before being engaged. The 2 crew members ejected, the weapons system officer was rescued, but the pilot was killed by Syrian rebel fighters while descending in his parachute. A war crime technically under international law. A Russian Marine was also killed during the rescue operation. Vladimir Putin threatened serious consequences, and Russia deployed S-400 sites to Syria. Russian fighter jets began escorting the bombers on every mission. It was one of the most dangerous moments in Russia and NATO relations in years, all because of a 50-year-old swing-wing bomber. Oh, and there was the USS Donald Cook incident in April of 2016. Russian Su-24s made repeated low passes within 30 meters of the American destroyer in the Baltic Sea. 30 meters is the length of a tennis court, so think about that. Luckily, there were no accidents. There were just deliberate shows of aggression and skill from the pilots. The United States Navy condemned this action, rightfully so, but luckily nothing came of this. And here is, in my opinion, the most important part of the Su-24's history. Ukraine-Russia war. And this is a very common topic on my videos, the Ukraine-Russia war. It's something I'm fascinated by, and with Russian military aviation, it happens to be one of the biggest sandboxes for this. Ukraine inherited Su-24s from the Soviet Union when it gained independence in 1991. By the time Russia launched its full-scale invasion in February of 2022, Ukraine had somewhere between 10 to 20 operational fencers. The problem, there's no standoff weapons. Without long-range missiles, Ukrainian crews had to fly their Asian bombers directly into the teeth of Russian air defenses to hit their targets. The losses were severe. The 7th Tactical Aviation Brigade, Ukraine's only Su-24 unit, took devastating hits in the first months of the war. Many of those pilots bravely flew those missions knowing they were not going to come back home. Then, in May of 2023, everything would actually change. The United Kingdom supplied Ukraine with something called the Storm Shadow cruise missile, a long-range precision air-launched weapon with a range well over 250 kilometers. And here's the thing among Ukrainian aircraft. Only the Su-24 could carry this. The Fencer, this Cold War relic, suddenly became Ukraine's most strategic strike platform. Ukrainian engineers working with British specialists modified the Su-24s to carry Storm Shadow missiles, or cruise missiles, using pylons salvaged from retired RAF Tornado GR-4 jets. Pretty impressive. The results were immediate and quite dramatic. Su-24s fired Storm Shadows at the headquarters of the Russian Black Sea Fleet in Sevastopol, struck the Sevastopol shipyard, damaged a submarine and a landing ship. They also hit a newly built Russian corvette at Kerch, and reportedly killed Russian lieutenant general and a command post. In December 2023, Ukrainian Su-24s destroyed the Russian landing ship, the Novorossiysk. I probably mispronounced that. Wow, it was important. A 50-year-old aircraft upgrade with 21st century weapons was reshaping the naval balance in the Black Sea. But here is the most important part of it. The Su-24's legacy, in my opinion, actually saved Ukraine. On February 24, 2022, before most of the world even really processed what was going on, the invasion begun. Russia was executing its masterstroke, a plan so bold it almost worked. Russia's primary military objective was not just territorial, it was the elimination of Ukraine's independent government. Kyiv is the ultimate target, and the key to taking Kyiv is a single airfield sitting just 12 miles from the city center, Hostomel Airport, home of the massive Antonov An-225 Myra airplane. Russian forces commenced their attack on the 24th of May with a pre-assault strikes, including 2 Caliber cruise missile striking the Hostomel Airport around 6 or 7 in the morning. Then came the helicopters, a wave of Russian VDV troops, an elite paratrooper formation for the 31st Guards Air Assault Brigade and the 45th Separate Guards Spetsnaz. So these are special forces. They flew in the Mi-8 transport helicopters escorted by the Ka-52 Alligators and Mi-24 attack helicopters, crossing from Belarus low along the Dnieper River into Hostomel Airport. The plan was to capture the airfield, land a second wave of 1,000 troops on Il-76 transport aircrafts, which were already actually airborne, and drive straight into Kyiv. The CIA did warn Ukraine that Russia intended to create an air bridge to decapitate the government. Ukrainian defenders, many of them just National Guardsmen, outnumbered and short ammunition, fought back very fiercely, shot down multiple helicopters with man-pads, but by afternoon Russian forces have captured the airport. This is where the Su-24 enters the story. 2 Ukrainian Su-24 bombers from the 7th Tactical Aviation Brigade managed to damage the runway. Those same crews who were flying those super old jets with Asian systems made a strike on their own country's airfield to deny it to the enemy. Meanwhile, on the ground, airport staff drove trucks onto the runway, making it completely unusable for Russian fixed-wing aviation. This plan worked. A second Russian force had loaded onto 18 Il-76 transport planes and appeared to be en route to Hostomel Airport before the mission had been aborted mid-air. Because there was no runway, thousands of Russian reinforcements never landed. The air bridge that was supposed to deliver an overwhelming force to Kyiv's doorstep never materialized. The fighting around Hostomel had been described as a decisive moment in the early stages of the invasion. It prevented the Russians from quickly taking control of Ukraine. And over the next month, Ukrainian forces steadily attritioned Russia's best airborne, Spetsnaz, and special forces units in the area. On March 25th, Russia announced a withdrawal from Kyiv. And having never penetrated the city's limits, by April 1st, it had pulled out of Hostomel entirely. Those 2 Su-24s, in my opinion, did not save the entire battle by themselves, but in the chaos of the opening hours, with while everything hung in the balance, they made a critical strike, which, in my opinion, probably actually saved Ukraine as we know it today. And I feel like those two should get some kind of recommendation because not very many people really know this. And while making this video on the SU-24, I think this is the most, well, important combat operation in its entire history. But that's it. That's the SU-24. A plane born from Cold War paranoia of the beloved F-111, forged through a brutal and deadly developmental process, lots of accidents, and, well, lots of issues. The plane was supposed to be retired years ago, but as of today, they're still flying. And in Ukraine, they're still flying today. And the Iranian war, as we heard of recently. Rumors are suggesting, and I cannot prove this, that those 6 U.S. service members that were unfortunately killed in the war were actually killed by a Su-24 fencer. I cannot prove this, but this is what I have seen online circulating, so take that with a grain of salt. But the Su-24 fencer is one of the coolest looking airplanes, in my opinion, with one of the, I guess, most impressive combat sorties or combat history in the Russian aviation. And it was developed for a time when we thought the world was going to end on one single sortie. But thank you guys so much for watching. I apologize for the lack of uploads the last 2 weeks. Yeah, just life always happens in good ways. But that's it. That's Su-24. I really appreciate it. Please comment down below what you think, what you thought, what you want to talk about. I do my best to respond to all of them. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. Good night.